Hello and welcome to episode 68 of The Sceptic, the Daily Sceptic's weekly podcast. I'm your host, Laurie Wastell, an associate editor at the Daily Sceptic. And as you can see, I'm not in the studio this week as I've been a little bit under the weather, but we do have two fantastic interviews lined up for you regardless. Daily Sceptic regular Ben Pyle takes down the delusions of the Telegraph's resident solar evangelist, Ambrose Evans-Pritchard. First, we're covering some recent developments in the world of AI and bursting a few of the bubbles around the supposed AI revolution that we're always told is coming, but never quite seems to arrive. And who better to discuss that with than Andrew Orlowski, Telegraph business and technology columnist and friend of the show.
Thanks very much. Friend and supporter. Thanks, Laurie.
Good stuff. Yes, we talk a lot. We've spoken quite a few times about AI on this show, but I think it is... Obviously, it's one of those trends that it is sort of never very far away from the news and is worth continuing to track.
Yeah.
And some of the things change in the day-to-day of it, but some of the key, I think, dynamics very much remain. And so, as you've written this week in the Telegraph, AI isn't magic. We're just being taken for marks. What do you mean by that? Why does it remain overhyped?
Well, this has been a really interesting past couple of weeks. What one AI scientist, one of Google's leading scientists, calls an outbreak of mass psychosis. Now, if you cast back to the end of last year, OpenAI was looking for bailouts. Microsoft has a 3% conversion rate. It's stuffing AI into like every product it can, including Notepad. But it has a 3% conversion ratio from free to paid. There's huge pushback from business, which is going, we're not seeing a return from this. And I think that led to OpenAI was hinting it might need government bailouts because the way they're doing it is so expensive and the return just isn't there. The return is billions, but it's not the trillions they're actually asking for. But just in the past couple of weeks, we've just seen a kind of an outbreak. I don't know if synchronized is the right word or coordinated, but people have just discovered Doomer AI, which I can explain has a 25-year history. The science fiction fantasy that AI is about to take over. And this has been a huge distraction from what I think is the reality of the bubble bursting. Bubble might burst quickly or slowly, but the bubble is bursting because you can't keep reality away forever.
What strikes one from the very beginning. In fact, I remember back I think 3 years ago, pretty much, when I was at Spiked, you sending us in an article about some MP on some select committee who had got very het up about future planning algorithms, which she thought were going to take over the world and then decide that we needed to cull all the cattle.
So the example that's been put to us is an entirely reasonable one. How do you cure climate change? You let a very clever algorithm go off and it realises that cows are a major contributor to climate change. So it decides that we need to get rid of cows. And because it's in the black box bit, we're not aware of the fact that actually, because it controls the feed cow manufacturers, because they're all on the Internet of Things in 50 years' time, that, somehow by some nefarious purpose the cows are nixed. And we don't know about it because it's a black box decision being made. So my interest is in how to make sure that there is a consciousness of the system that the computers, the program sits within. It doesn't just exist. It needs to know that it relies on electricity, and if it poisons the planet, it's also knackered. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, this kind of doomerism is very deeply embedded for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's another characteristic, if I'm allowed to say the word, from Tropic Thunder. When people first encounter it, they go full retard. I mean, they go fully into this kind of fantasy sci-fi world. Now, this is actually a big money industry. There's around $1 billion has been spent on promoting this sci-fi fantasy that AI is going to kill us. Now, you're not going mad. AI is nowhere near the capability of running out of control. It can't leap from system to system. All you have to do is pull the plug. It can't build its own replication systems. It can't sort of invent a computer that can't be unplugged. This is a wild sci-fi fantasy, but it actually goes back to the very roots of what I was talking about the last time I was here, which is this effective altruism, this very radical utilitarian cult. And I think from the effect that the AI doomer stories have had on people who first encountered them, ranging from Michael Gove to Hugh Grant, you can see how much influence it has. So where do we start? About 2001, transhumanists were obsessed with the singularity. So there was kind of work going on, purely hypothetical, science fiction speculation was taking place online about what would happen in the far distant future if an AI software kind of became able to organise itself and sort of determine its own existence. It would kill everyone. But things really start rocking when Peter Thiel gives a very young kind of savant, very online person called Yudkowsky money to start an institute. And that then becomes the AI doom industry. It gathers steam. Yudkowsky then starts about 5 years later a rationalist forum called Less Wrong. And then Britain has a contribution at this point. There's the Oxford utilitarian philosophers join in. You've more or less got all the ingredients there for effective altruism, which then sort of sprouts out of it. And by 2023, you're looking at, by the end of 2023, $500 million has been spent by over 50 philanthropic institutes, which are extremely rich, cranks, funding this. According to David Sachs, the White House AI czar, who I should point out is very pro-AI, he has lots of investments and interest in it. This has now spent $1 billion, and it's completely unhelpful to rational debate or to having any kind of AI policy to have an AI doomer there. And if you look at Starmer's advisors, they are all effective altruist AI doomer people. It's been an incredible takeover of the political system.
What precisely is that money going into? I mean, is it research or what exactly?
It's research, and also, I mean, quite explicitly, it's public persuasion. So it's influence, it's political marketing. In effect, it's promoting the idea that and we've seen very specific instances of this. Like in the past week, we've seen. At its most basic, it's what we call the ego, what skeptics call the ego it's alive moment, which is the AI has done something, it has demonstrated emergent behaviour which we didn't expect, and that may be a sign of kind of spontaneous intelligence. There was a story that a couple of weeks ago about groups of chatbots starting to strategize. That turned out to be completely fake, because what people thought they were seeing was chatbots organising as if they're humans, but what it was actually was like people were going in and pretending to be chatbots and influencing the chatbots. So it was humans pretending to be chatbots, pretending to be humans. Absolutely bizarre. There was another fake story, which again, it circulates, and then a day later people just say, well, it was completely made up. Was that a programmer wrote some code and uploaded it, and then the GitHub repository then started to slander him on social media, saying he was a rubbish programmer. It's quite funny, but it's a completely ludicrous story. But this all kind of, the idea that great breakthroughs are imminent, that it's out of control, are all part of this narrative, and they've been so clear. One kind of redeeming, I wouldn't say redeeming, but one kind of interesting feature of EAs is that they document everything they do, or certainly used to until Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested, in excruciating detail. Every kind of moral sort of calculus they have, which always diminishes humans in favour of, say, non-human life or imaginary humans. They all spell it out in terribly gory sort of detail because they just can't help themselves.
Yes, well, and I suppose another one there with that, as you say, kind of catastrophism about, are they talking to each other, and maybe are they strategizing, and these things, is that, I mean, in a sense, even if that were true, there's lots of sort of extra steps that people are just completely imagining, and one of the main one being, all these algorithms are doing are producing bits of text that humans can read and listen to if they want to, or not. Right, and that's a very basic step. So they don't have bodies; they don't really control anything. So, but there's people sort of forget that very basic part.
Yes, it's like that MP who thought, "What if the AIs decide to kill all the cows?" Well, what if the AIs decide to kill all the cows? They can't do anything. They don't have an army. They don't even have cattle prods. Again, it's like the paper. People take theoretical things very literally. I think there's a couple of problems here. I mean, one seems to be specific to the UK, which is there's a very low it's kind of an information failure in that for expertise, people don't consult people outside these groups, largely of effective altruists who are, have an agenda. So they don't get a second opinion. They're purely not skeptical enough about the absurdities that are going on here. And I think that's probably a problem with the media and policy making in general, is that they're just not skeptical enough. But I think it's pushing an open door. The EAs, the Duma X-Risk, short for existential risk EAs, are pushing an open door because people want to believe in magic so badly. And they, which has always been a theme of mine, that people sort of diminish the value of human beings at the same time they make the machines magical. It's just been too easy for them, really. People want to believe, and I guess we always have. It's almost like a bug in human nature. We're entranced by a machine being magical. This comes over really strongly in a book, lovely book by Tom Standage of The Economist. He put out at least 25 years ago about it was called The Mechanical Turk, and it was a man in a box who played chess, but this toured Europe to enormous audiences, and people wanted to believe that the machine was actually thinking and beating a human chess player. It was just a man curled up in a box making chess moves. What we're seeing today is really no different to that. Magical.
And I think another good point you make is that really, so there's the doomerism, and then there's all the money that's going into it because of the doomerism. But actually, it's a lot of the same people who are doomerists about it who are in fact flogging the whole idea as well. And so the flip side is, well, yes. AI is either way. You're thinking that AI is magical and it's going to completely transform the world. And either way, then you're angling for a check, it seems.
Yes, you're angling for a check, but you're also asking to be put in control. I thought one of the most disturbing stories last week was it turns out that one of the effective altruists, she's an effective altruist at Anthropic, is writing a constitution. This is a spectacular piece of anthropomorphism. She's writing a constitution which gives the chatbots human rights. Again, to diminish our freedoms, to diminish our needs and concerns. It's kind of, you just think it's good. There's going to be this is a moment of exuberance, I think, is quite unprecedented. And there's going to be some really sore heads when the hangover hits. Like, did I really write that? Did we allow people to write a constitution for a effing chatbot? Yes, yes, and we took them seriously. I think, you can't. It's like it reminds me of the Aztecs throwing children on the fire to sort of postpone doomsday. I think we've built the wrong AI. I think there's some value there, but it's not trillions of dollars of value. Simply to spend 200 billion on improving programming a little bit, and there are useful things there, or 100 billion on a nice natural language interface, that's never going to pay itself back. China doesn't have this problem. It hasn't built our AI. We've built an AI that's extremely expensive, far too expensive, and it needs to be recouped from businesses and consumers, neither of whom look like they're willing to pay for it. So that crash is coming.
Yeah, and I suppose to sketch another element of the magical thinking, there is, I think there's another point you've made, is that it's a very powerful tendency for organisations that aren't necessarily going very well, like actually you might say much of the British police. There is this tendency to say, oh, well, we're going to bring in AI, or to be honest, almost any element of the British state, and it's going to make us much more efficient and much better. And so this was in evidence recently in Shibana Mahmood, the Home Secretary's bizarre remarks about bringing the panopticon to the country to spy on criminals and so on. But also just bringing AI in to predict where crime would happen next. And one of the points I made about this was that, of course, it's just made it seem revolutionary, right? But actually, the police using data to predict crime is something they've been trying to do for about 50 years, and actually they're never allowed to do because it's politically incorrect to do so. But more broadly, the police is not an institution that's doing especially well, if you think about the arrest rate or anything else. But it's not doing the basics well. And now they're saying, oh, we're going to smooth everything out and be this high-tech, modern new force by using AI. It's papering over the cracks.
It is. The underlying machine learning should be able to give you some data analytical powers. And I think the way I see it, when the bubble bursts, we'll be back in 2022 without the gimmick of large language models, and we're back to machine learning data analysis, which is fine. It's problematic when you actually rely on the output and stop making human judgments on what that is, because it's going to have a lot of errors in it. But if you ask anybody policing, what they'll say is that the detective and the kind of work on the streets has been swamped by desk work, paperwork, and instead of kind of getting rid of the paperwork or thinking about how you police differently, you just sort of automate the paperwork. And there was a cartoon when ChatGPT came out, which I've probably referred to in a couple of previous podcasts, where the lazy workers are delighted with it because it just generates reams of text for them, and they still have their jobs, so they're actually doing less than ever. And it's just the AI is just generated. Chatbots are just generating this text that nobody ever reads. Doesn't need to exist in the first place. But I found that panopticon remark, I was like, there should have been huge national news, and it wasn't, because the idea of a panopticon is people alter their own behaviour because they're being watched. And that is it's morally dubious in a prison, but kind of just, you can make a case for it in a prison. But this assumes that everybody in Britain is in a prison. And therefore, she's sort of conferring the authority that a jailer has onto sort of general law enforcement. But the only assumption is, the only kind of logical conclusion is that she treats it like a prison, and we are all prisoners who have already surrendered their kind of human rights the day they step in. They've surrendered, they've literally surrendered the freedom to act, and they expect to be watched all the time. Really bizarre thing it's a disturbing thing for anyone in power to say.
And just again, bizarre for organizations that aren't doing the basics to be sort of trotting out these new programs to look like they're sort of high-tech RoboCop types when they're not arresting the criminals. That's very straightforward.
Yes, I think a lot of problems are really hard to solve, but that doesn't mean we should. They have lots of ologies behind them. They have lots of kind of factors why they've become knotty problems. But that doesn't mean we should just look for a miracle technology to break through and do all that hard work for us. I think large parts of the politics on the left or the right now look for miracle AI to improve productivity, to remove bureaucracy. The most bizarre of all is Dominic Cummings' obsession with replacing voters with chatbots, which I think is just an incredible piece of self-delusion. I don't know if have I mentioned this to on the podcast before?
No, I don't think you have. Oh,
right. He loves this idea. His great friend, Ben Warner, has come up with the idea of synthetic focus groups. In other words, instead of people reacting to policies, which is bad enough in itself, you then have just sort of groups of chatbots reacting to policies. Cummings thinks this is brilliant because you can, in his telling, do things quickly. Well, the point isn't to do something quickly. It's to actually kind of find out what people value, and when you're in office, you're actually serving them. You're serving us, not a bunch of chatbots. So, Cummings has not had an original idea, really, that has not come from these rationalist groups or these effective altruist groups for, as far as I can tell, 10 years. Every single thing has come from them, and a lot of them are just terrible ideas.
Let's get on to another particular, AI fantasy, I think you might say, which is the idea of having AI data centres in space, supposedly because they're easier to have up there, and it will cost less. Is that true, Andrew? Will we be seeing that soon?
Well, what matters is what is the output of the data centre. Will that cost less? And I can see no way it can cost anything other than a great deal more. So I did a little piece quickie for Unheard on this, and I think essentially what a data centre is producing is a commodity. It's a bit stream, and that is very, very competitive. You can't differentiate it in any way. And, you've got these enormous facilities the size of towns that need lots of cooling. If every single nut and bolt has to be put in space, you then have to put extra shielding on it. And there's a video going around explaining that space isn't cold. I mean, space isn't really cold. The problem is getting the heat from inside to the outside, and you can't open a window and let the cold in, because that's on Earth. That's the air doing the heat transfer. You can't do that in space. So cooling anything in space is actually extremely problematic. I think it's one of the Hail Marys of. I mean, Musk has more or less killed off Tesla. He's kind of starving it to death by putting all the money into other robots, humanoid robots, and the space program. He shifted the space program from Mars to the moon. He's very good at throwing up these distractions and hoping that nobody notices how impractical they are.
So we won't be seeing that, you think?
Yes, I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but let's move on then to something that we are starting to see. Which is a development that you have been warning, which is what you describe as the uni company.
Yeah.
And I suppose the one that will be most obvious in people's minds is Amazon, which is obviously a big seller to consumers, but it's also able to be the kind of the search engine as well. Yeah. And maybe it's also able to have things on the supply end as well. You know, it's not just an intermediary. Yeah. And so why, some might say, well, you know, companies should take advantage of economies of scale, and that's free market working as it should. But why is this a concern?
Right. Yes, this is. I think it's an area where the right and conservatives have been asleep at the wheel, and they're effectively handing over the next decades of policy development to the left to do the running on this. What's happened this time, I think, is historically unique. So in the 30s, you had Mussolini. You had markets in Italy, but they were not free markets, because Mussolini would license, the state would license a couple of producers or one or two producers in each sector and sort of set the price. In communist economies, the state was outside it, setting the price. Neither were free markets. What we're seeing now is the middleman, and this is really important to understand, the middleman sets the price. And then obscures it using information, by rationing information, to make sure neither the buyer. So over here is the buyer, over here is the seller. Here I am, Google auction, or I'm Amazon Marketplace. I can manipulate over here and over here. I can play both sides, and I can conceal my behaviour really effectively from both sides. I mean, this is played out on things like Spotify as well, where they don't tell the artist where exactly, they don't give them enough information to plan, say, a marketing campaign around it. So this is very different. I mean, this is not 1979, where it's just as simple as rolling back the state. The person who's perverting the market, who's suppressing the market dynamism, is in the middle of the market, and that's completely new. What I'm seeing is, so these are platforms. This is kind of, I don't think it was planned. I don't think anybody in the 90s anticipated that a platform could have so much power as it does. But I think the right has been asleep. It's been completely negligent in addressing this. It's not a big tech issue. Do you like tech? I like tech. Do you like big tech? Oh, I don't like big tech. Leave that aside. The market has been abandoned by people who say they are free marketeers. Only one result comes from that, which is that people who have no interest in getting a market functioning again are going to do the driving with regulation and how you approach this. So Yanis Varoufakis has written a book on this called Techno-Feudalism, and he was in Unheard. He's unheard a lot, and his case is only Marxists can address this problem. Well, they can address it in one way, but they're not really interested in bringing supply and demand, buyers and sellers, getting that market functioning again. And there aren't many of us in the UK, largely because of the way the donor class to the think tanks operates. It's very sentimental about Mrs. Thatcher. It just wants to kind of repeat the old tunes and think they still work. I think we're in a completely different world on that. I can give you one example that's kind of vivid. So Google and Meta operate, digital advertising is absolutely an enormous market. Google and Meta have 2/3 of it, and 1/3 is actually left to the open market, where those forces of supply and demand work together to mutual interest to whittle away the margin that the middleman takes. But what Google and Meta can do is to hide a 30% margin when it should be a 5% margin, or if you ask Tesco, they're delighted with a 5% margin. They can hide that margin whenever there's been an innovation to make it function more like a market. They've kind of destroyed it. But when on those brief sort of few weeks or months that experiment took place, there was one called header bidding, which is the subject of a competition lawsuit. Both the publisher and the advertiser got more money because the thing in the middle, Google and Meta, was squeezed, and that's exactly how a market should work. So my concern here is that the hypothetical uni company simply draws all the value, not just from that one particular market, digital advertising, but it will suck it from everything. And I just wanted people to focus on that. It might seem strange because I'm very down on AI, but you can't be bullish on AI and not kind of have some thought for why the market has completely disappeared. There will be 4 or 5 companies in the future, I think, who, as everything becomes information, who capture all the value from everything.
Well, you say it's obscured. That only Amazon say will know both ends. But if I'm a seller of a dehumidifier, say, can I not then look at the price that Amazon is selling that at to consumers and sort of judge my end accordingly, or is that?
That's an interesting point. If you're a Western, European, British, or American manufacturer of a dehumidifier, what you'll find is Amazon has rung the factories in China, has given them an enormous amount of information, sales data, technical information, and before long, the Chinese product, the Chinese clone, which almost certainly won't work as well as the one you make, is being it's undercutting it on Amazon. So Amazon is actually active on the supply side to destroy any margin you may wish to retain as a brand. It destroys all brands and replaces them with a kind of Chinese clone. Again, I think that's like Amazon's part in destroying Western manufacturing and Western industrial capacity, which is literally our capacity to defend ourselves, has been ignored by the media, but also by kind of the utility maximizers who say, well, look, the cheapest good is the best, and there's no other consequences to that. Well, if the consequences are we can't defend ourselves, that's a pretty big consequence. All I'm asking for is people to engage in the debate and feel confident about taking part. If you've got real business experience where your livelihood has depended on market forces, I want you to take part. It's just we've had so many parts of life where we've not been allowed to comment on it. It's all been shushed up like the shape of the nature of texture of Britain, mass migration. We weren't allowed to sort of talk about it. You could kick up a fuss if you couldn't complain if 7 million people came, but if 70 were on a plane leaving, you were allowed to complain about that. That was terrible. There are whole areas of sort of the public sphere I just want people to engage in and decide what we can do. It's tricky because to regulate it, if you're a Marxist, you just take control of it and the problem is solved. You haven't actually restored the market. It requires a really subtle mix, and we don't know what it is yet, of making sure that information goes to both sides, back to both sides. It can't be hoarded by any actor in that economic situation. So if you're either a buyer or particularly if you're a supplier, you need a lot more information on where the customers are and what they do. You will have to break up some of the big companies, but that's not the end goal. The end goal should be ensuring that information flows so you get a market back. That makes sense?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, if Yanis Varoufakis is unhappy about techno-feudalism, well, what broadly replaced feudalism was more of a market economy. And so, I mean, that is presumably what you would want to find a way of reintroducing.
Yes. And I mean, labour was mobile. I mean, it was Britain benefited enormously from, in the Black Death, they had to pay the farm labourers wages because they were scarce. So, that really set England's trajectory on a path.
Yes, quite. Okay, well, lots to think about there. Andrew Orlowski, thank you very much for coming on The Sceptic.
Thanks for having me, Laurie. Great to be on.
Now, as concern about supposed climate Armageddon continues to wane, there are those who still want to claim that the climate alarmist predictions are set to come true. But are they right? Well, to discuss that this week, I'm very pleased to be joined once again by Ben Pyle, who is a journalist and Daily Sceptic regular. Welcome back, Ben.
Thanks for having me again, Laurie. Good to be back.
Very, very good to have you here, Ben. So, yes, let's begin with this piece that you've written in response to this column by the Telegraph's Ambrose Evans-Pritchard, who you describe, I think, as the paper's long-standing solar power evangelist, and indeed one of the few conservatives still over there who believes himself to be a green zealot and wants his fellow conservatives to be one too. So what has he been writing this week, and how is he sort of trying, it seems, to maintain the idea that the climate alarmist predictions haven't gone wrong and the temperatures do continue to rise? And is that really right?
Well, I think it's probably wrong. What Ambrose Evans-Pritchard has done is he's read what is essentially a blog post by James Hansen, who is often referred to as the godfather of climate alarmism. He gave testimony in 1988 to, I forget which branch of the US government, but that sort of set the ball rolling. That really put climate change on the agenda, and a very particular form of climate change alarmism too. But he's been mostly wrong in his predictions. He's overestimated sea level rise and global warming over the last 4 decades, often even sort of putting some distance by doing so between himself and other categorical alarmists, not people you would mistake for climate skeptics. People like people like Michael Mann, who was sort of infamously litigious against his critics, and has zero patience for anyone remotely related to climate skepticism at all. At the beginning of the year, what people tend to do is make predictions for what the rest of the year might have in store. And climate alarmists love a prediction. And so the climate alarmist community had have been having little discussions with each other about what kind of warming there's going to be for 2026 and possibly 2027. And so James Hansen downloaded some of his thoughts into a blog post and published them on his academic webpage. Ambrose Evans-Pritchard has seen this and regarded this as a scientific prediction that there is going to be a temperature anomaly of 1.7 degrees centigrade in 2027. So what he says this means is that anyone who's at the moment feeling a bit comfortable about the fact that climate change is off the political agenda is going to have some kind of rude awakening over the next year or so, and that's going to bring a lot of people back into the green Tory fold, into the arms of John Gummer and Zach Goldsmith, if you like, and Claire Coutinho's contingent within the Conservative Party are going to be diminished by this news. But what I think especially strikes me about this is that...
That's the end of the free part of the podcast. If you'd like to listen to the bonus interview, you'll need to become a regular donor to the Daily Sceptic. For as little as £5 a month, not only will you be able to watch or listen to the whole podcast, you'll also be able to access articles behind our paywall and join our discussion forum on Discord, where you'll have an opportunity to discuss the latest content on the Daily Sceptic with other donors, members of the editorial team, and some of your favourite contributors. Once you become a donor, log in to the Daily Sceptic using the same email, and you'll find a link to the premium version of the podcast on the homepage, including instructions about how to listen to it on your favourite podcasting app. Remember, you can access all this bonus content for as little as £5 a month. Just go to dailysceptic.org/donate.